Is a war breaking out in the South China Sea? There has been a flare-up, a clash between China and the Philippines. Manila is calling it the most serious incident yet. It is accusing China of deliberately escalating tensions in the high seas. Just take a look at what's happening. A Chinese Coast Guard vessel has collided with its Philippine counterpart. In the video, you can also see that the Chinese vessel goes on to shadow the Philippine ship. Here's another video of that collision. Take a look. This happened in the South China Sea. On the 5th of March, a little after dawn, the Philippine Coast Guard vessel suffered some structural damage from that collision. But the Chinese weren't done. Around an hour later, there was another flare-up. The Chinese attacked a Philippine supply vessel. It was blocked and harassed by the Chinese Coast Guard and the Chinese maritime militia. The boat was then water-cannoned. Its windshield was shattered and its crew grounded. Now, the Philippine South China Sea Task Force claims a top admiral was on board this vessel when it was attacked by the Chinese Coast Guard. He was unharmed. In this video, you can see the two vessels colliding. That's the moment of impact.
Medyo nag-vibrate yung
There were some vibrations, and as you can see, the glass shattered. It was loud. It's a good thing they didn't continue using the water cannon further and they pulled back.
Buti lang hindi nila tinuloy, nag-pull back na.
It's important to note that all of this was happening near the Second Thomas Shoal. This Philippine boat was carrying supplies for troops stationed at the shoal. Reuters claims that its reporter was on board one of the Philippine vessels and was witness to the Chinese aggression. Reuters reports it witnessed, and I'm quoting here, several close encounters between the Philippines and the Chinese Coast Guard vessels, which eventually led to a collision and the Chinese Coast Guard using water cannon at one of the Philippine supply boat. Now, here's another video of that attack on the Philippine vessel. The Philippines says the Chinese vessel sailed towards its boat. It made dangerous maneuvers, and that led to that collision. What does China have to say to its defense? The Chinese Coast Guard claims it was only taking what it calls control measures against quote-unquote illegal intrusion by the Philippine ships. What does this mean? The Second Thomas Shoal is some 1,300 kilometers from the Chinese mainland. It is, in fact, within the Philippine EEZ, barely 190 kilometers from the island of Palawan. But this has not stopped China from staking claim on this reef. In fact, China claims almost all of the South China Sea, including the exclusive economic zones of the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia. What's the basis of this bizarre Chinese claim? Beijing's so-called 9-dash line, which, by the way, has recently become a 10-dash line. These imaginary dashes are meant to justify China's exceptionalism, to defend its maritime aggression and territorialism. There's no other way to put it. All these tactics explain why China believes, and wrongly so, that its recent violence in the South China Sea was restrained.
The Chinese Coast Guard responded to the Philippines' infringement and provocation at the Ranai Shoal in accordance with the law and took necessary enforcement measures that were legitimate, legal, professional, restrained and beyond reproach. In this incident, who was initiating the provocation? who violated international law and endangered peace and stability in the South China Sea. The truth is clear.
The truth, the Philippines says, is that Chinese actions were quote-unquote patently illegal and downright uncivilized. The Philippines summoned China's deputy chief of mission in Manila in protest against Chinese aggression, but China is pointing the finger at the United States. Beijing claims that the US is using the Philippines as a pawn to stir up tensions in the South China Sea. The Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning has a piece of advice for Manila. The Philippines should not let itself be at the mercy of the United States. I don't know how many of you know this, but Manila and Washington have a mutual defense treaty. This treaty says the two countries must defend each other if attacked, which also means incidents like these, flare-ups like these, raise the chances of an American involvement in the South China Sea. The Pentagon is already criticizing Beijing for putting lives at risk. This is the Pentagon spokesperson, Pat Ryder.
The United States is going to continue to stand by our Philippine ally, and our commitment to our mutual defense treaty is ironclad.
How many more collisions and water cannon incidents before a US warship or an American warplane intervenes? And how quickly will things escalate once that happens? Is China simply testing the waters? Is it testing the limits? Clearly, there are a lot of questions at these points, and can you blame me for asking these? The South China Sea is one of the most militarized waters on this planet. It has been witness to too many conflicts so far. Let me recount them. In 1974, China seized the Paracel Island from Vietnam. 70 Vietnamese troops died. In 1988, Vietnam and China fought over the Spratly Islands. Vietnam lost 60 sailors. In 2020, China and the Philippines engaged in a standoff. Both countries accuse the other of intrusions in the Scarborough Shoal. There are way too many players in the South China Sea, and they are all just one flare-up away from a full-fledged war. Question is, will the latest confrontation be that trigger? You know what? The last thing the world needs right now is another war. Gaza is still burning, as is Ukraine. The war in the Red Sea has gone underwater. It has cut internet connections around the world. Look at what Manila is saying. It claims China is deliberately stirring up trouble in the South China Sea. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations has called for restraint in the South China Sea. The ASEAN members were meeting in Melbourne to mark the 50th anniversary of Canberra's association with the bloc. A joint statement by ASEAN read, "We recognize the benefits of having the South China Sea as a sea of peace, stability and prosperity. We encourage all countries to avoid any unilateral actions that endanger peace, security and stability in the region." In Manila, a free climber scaled a 47-story tower. This was his way of showing support for the Philippines' claims over the Second Thomas Shoal. Australia says it is concerned about what's happening in the South China Sea. Clearly, this is not just any other flare-up in the South China Sea at the moment. This is a high-stakes confrontation. It is polarizing, and it definitely has the potential to escalate. What happens next is anybody's guess. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.